what the definition of insanity is.
You and I are gonna tear shit up!
Let's show them how cyber commandos get it done.
Mark Force style, motherfucker!
This thing rules! The thing rules!
Oh hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it,
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
but first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules.
Hey man, you ever play those Far Cry video games?
I love them so much. They are some of my favorite games of all time, and I don't even want to call them a guilty pleasure because people are always just like, they roll their eyes at them, all these like, whatever. There's a lot of people that just don't like the idea of these games. They think they're all the same. That's great. Maybe they are. They're really good. They're really fun, and I have a blast playing them and blowing stuff up. They're a good time.
Okay, so let's back this up because there have been Far Cry games for almost 20 years, and some of them are like others, and others are not like some of them. So I think we should go way back to the beginning because like when people say Far Cry games, generally referring to anything since 2012, like anything since Far Cry 3 onward, maybe Far Cry 2. Far Cry 2 is a weird sort of vestigial one, but the first Far Cry game was actually the first CryEngine game. Like it's a sort of proto Crysis in a sense.
It was before like, hey, can it run Crysis?
Yeah.
They were like, hey, we can do like a lush island locale with beautiful palm trees and men.
Yeah, and it was like one of the most gorgeous looking first person shooters that was like, oh, look at the palm trees, look at the beautiful water. Now shoot that man in the head and strangle him with your hands. Do you know what Far Cry was before that?
Was it like, it's like a top down isometric?
No,
it wasn't.
Okay, so before Far Cry was Far Cry.
Sorry, that was Fallout. I'm stupid.
No, Far Cry, that's Fallout. It's a different video game.
My fake gamer card just arrived.
You just got our show shut down.
I wanted to show it off. I wanted to show people that I'm a fake gamer.
No, Far Cry is a Far Cry from Fallout, but it's also a Far Cry from what it started out as, which was, I'm not making this up, this is not a joke, it sounds like some shit that we'd make up. The first thing that was Far Cry shaped was a Crytek developed tech demo that was called Exile Dinosaur Island. Like Exile, like not like you're cast out of something, but like if X-Men were an island. So like Isle.
You and I have been like on podcasts saying for 10 years now that they need to make a dinosaur Far Cry, and you're telling me that they did, so and they never did it again.
That's generous to say that it's a dinosaur Far Cry because it is like, it's hilarious. Like it's from 2001 and it's pretty, but it's very much like tech demo, show you a graphics card pretty, where it's basically just a bunch of fucking palm trees and water and sunsets, and then there's just these janky ass dinosaurs. They're not even janky. They're just like 2001 era, like the best quality dinosaur graphics you could have in 2001, which look about as good as you'd expect now. They're kind of like, they're whatever, but they're not really doing anything. Like it's not a full fledged game. They're just these dinosaurs just standing around and kind of just doing nothing. You don't have guns. It's sort of like a, you can just move the camera around and fly through the world.
Got it.
So it's really weird that somehow went from that to the original Far Cry, which was this standalone thing that was all about basically like a super soldier on an island, and it was sort of it sort of had like a bit of an identity for a minute. Like there was Far Cry, was it Instinct or something? There's like a bunch of sort of spin-offs of it.
Yeah. They basically like ported it, and I did a listing on IGN at our day job a couple years ago that was like the top 10 Far Cry games.
And there's like a Wii one. There's like really
and people were mad at me because they're like, there's not 10 Far Cry games, and I'm like, okay, there's like 8 and then a bunch of fragments of Far Cry games that are sort of like remakes of other ones or like half-ass ports of other ones that have like motion control and stuff like that. But
apparently there's actually 11 Far Cry games because you didn't even count Exile Dinosaur Island.
I did not count Exile Dinosaur Island. But yeah, I remember playing Far Cry. I went back and I replayed all of them, or all the mainline ones at least. And the original one is like obviously, extremely dated, but in the same way a lot of like old school first person shooters are. But it's not what will take like the modern Far Cry player aback a little bit playing it is that it's like a lot more sort of like level based, segmented. Like there's a lot of sort of open endedness to it. Like you can approach different scenarios in different ways. But the modern like open world Far Cry where like animals are attacking you and you're taking their body parts and turning them into wallets and stuff like that.
No, the open
Not
world
really
thing,
there yet.
that didn't happen properly until 2. That was my first proper Far Cry. I vaguely remember when Far Cry came out and I was confused as to how it wasn't Crysis because I sort of knew about Crysis at the time. Meanwhile, Crysis is its whole own thing where that started out as an open world game and then Crysis 2 made it like not open world or something. They like made it sort of
reverse Far Cry.
It just doesn't make any sense. And I got its whole own mythology. And you play as like a dude who looks like he like on steroids wearing a scuba suit or whatever. But then like in Far Cry, you're just like this. You're like a muscle man or whatever. And they Uwe Boll made a movie of Far Cry that no one talks about. It's just weird that like, you know, we talk about video game movies and like one of the most, I don't know. I think at the time when that movie got made, Far Cry wasn't really a franchise anyone gave a shit about. And so the movie sort of came and went, but it's just this weird like afterthought that you're like, oh, that's right. There is a Far Cry movie.
What's weird is that the Far Cry movie that I know of is The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio.
So, yeah, that's the other weird tangential thing. I want to kind of come back to that because that's its whole own separate DNA. Far Cry 2 is, I think, where it really started to find itself, and that is a wonderfully weird game. And I know it's a lot of people's favorite. There's a lot of kind of Far Cry purists who are like, that's how it should be. Far Cry 2 is definitely a gorgeous game. It is a beautiful game. It is the first one that's like fully open world. You know, it's still got that kind of like that GTA thing where like you can't go to a certain part of I guess they all sort of have that earlier on where there's areas that are blocked off, you know? Yeah.
It's really interesting because it's like the TV show Survivor and Far Cry have a lot in common in terms of just like taking somebody from outside of a specific locale, airdropping them in there and having them survive, right? And Far Cry 2 takes place in like the African savannah, and it's also part of that whole 2008 sepia toned, you know, like there was a whole bunch of games that around that time. Like GTA 4 came out a year later, I think, or around the same time. And, you know, like Gears of War and all that, all these games that for the longest time, everybody was just like, everything just looked brown.
It was like muddy and dusty. And it was gorgeous. It's a good looking game.
Like when your mom helped you make a treasure map when you were a kid by putting like lemon juice on paper and putting it in the oven or whatever. That's like video games look like that for like 7 years.
It's funny
because speaking of which, you get a treasure map in this game, or you get a map in this game, but like it does this really annoying thing where every time you look at the map, you hold it up. Because they're trying to do like the whole thing about the Far Cry games is that they're first person, but they're really dynamic. They're very like in your face. You know, we're going ski boarding and we're going spelunking and diving, and it's all very like GoPro like.
Well, they didn't do that until 3. We're going to come to that. I want to talk about 3 because it's a Baja Blast of a good time. Like it's a Mountain Dew ass Hawaiian shirt video game. Far Cry 2 is like it looks like a cigarette smoke DMV smells. Like it's just this dusty, sad, kind of musty game. And mechanically it's drab. Like it's fun. You can start fires and like kill a bunch of dudes and there's like, you know, animals to fight and diamonds to find and stuff. But like there's all these wonderful things in the game that like by design kind of suck. Where like you have malaria the whole time and you constantly have to like give yourself malaria shots. And if you don't, you just like, you'll be like about to kill a bunch of bad guys and you'll just like faint in the grass.
I think, and I'm trying to think of what of this era was sort of adjacent to this, but like survival elements started creeping their way into video games for a while there, right? Like I think one of the first ones I ever played was Lost in Blue for the Nintendo DS, which was an extension of Survival Kids. Same sort of deal. People dropping on an island. Significantly less guns, 0 guns in those games. But in terms of like the Far Cry thing of like the micromanaging little parts of it that are just like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. It is one of the first games I played that did that. But this one specifically, Far Cry 2, you're constantly battling malaria and you have to take medicine for it. And if you're not taking care of it the right way, like you start getting really foggy and dizzy and you collapse. And it's just it's a pain in the ass.
Which is like, it's not fun. It's immersive and it's, you know, compelling, but it's like not a fun, you know, I would say riding on a jet ski, fun. Jumping out of an airplane, fun. Falling over because you're sick, not really fun. You know, it's different. The other one is they have, correct me if I'm wrong. That one has weapon degradation, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Where you'll be like shooting your gun and you'll be like, your gun broke. And you're like, the fuck is that? Like, what? Like, what? Like, I'm going to return this game. This sucks. Like, it's a first person shooter and all the guns just get like crap in them because it's so sepia toned out there. Even the guns are like rusty and dusty. So you're just dealing with that the whole time.
The fascinating thing about this game too is that it has animals in it, but they don't care about you. They don't want to hurt you. They just exist in Africa. And there's gazelles, frogs, goats, wildebeest, zebras, buffaloes, chickens, jackals, shit like that. And they all just are there. And they're like, what's with this dude with guns and malaria? Like you don't strip them for parts or like use them for any meaningful reason. You can, you can't even kill them. They're just there. It's very funny.
I think I remember like just firing a gun at a zebra or something, and it just like got mad and left or whatever. The other one is there's just blood diamonds everywhere, and they're just hidden. And you have this like blood diamond tracker where it's pretty much just like playing like hot or cold, where you're like, if you, I don't know, you lose your air tag or whatever, and you're like bing, 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 and you're just like, I feel like there's a thing, and again, open world games, Far Cry, it's especially managed to really kind of find this thread and pull on it where, you'll be on your way from point A to point B. You're going to go fight the bad guy. You're going to do the mission. And then you see something like, ooh, what's that? And you just it's just like ADD bait, Yep. And in this case, it was the laziest possible one where just like this little shit thing on your dashboard in your car would start blinking. And you're like, ooh, there's jewels around here. I should stop my car and start rooting around on the ground like a, like a truffle pig. Got to find those blood diamonds. And like, you get them and you can use them for upgrades or whatever, but it's the least fun way of engaging with a little treasure hunt where they'll be behind a house and you just got to like look around and you're like squinting because it's all dirty and musty looking. So yeah, Far Cry 2, really cool game, game. But like also
see, you can see the jumps that are happening, right? Like they're noticeable and that just keeps going for a little while, I would say. Yeah, and then they go sideways a few times. We'll get there.
So yeah, no, Far Cry 2 was my first one, and I don't remember what made me feel like I needed to play it. I think I just thought it was like sort of. I like the clean design, not that it was very dusty and musty and dirty design, but like I liked that it was. I remember the first time I loaded it up on like PS3, I was like, holy shit, this is photorealistic. In that way that things just looked better back then. But it was like the best looking game I'd ever seen. And I like the sort of, immersive nature of it where like when you're driving the car, if you crash the car, you like fall out of the car and you're like the whole camera spins and it's felt so sort of, it really leans into the first person side of things. So I was like, cool, I like Far Cry. That's fun. I don't think I finished. I think I just kind of like played it for a long time. And actually, I know what happened. I was playing it on PC, except I had a MacBook Pro and I was playing it on Boot Camp. And I'm like 80% certain that I fried the motherboard of that computer by playing too much Far Cry 2 on it, which is funny because like
you gave your MacBook malaria, basically.
Yeah, I gave it malaria, or maybe it was all those dynamic wildfires I started where you would just be like, oh, I'm going to start a little fire, and it just like slowly turns into this big brush blaze, and the computer gradually heats up, and I'm like, whoa, it's the 4D experience, and then I had to buy a new computer, and then I wished that I had blood diamonds. But fast forward a few years, Far Cry 3. This is the one. This is the one that this is the best one.
This is the one that created the franchise as we know it, revolutionized first-person open world games, or both of those categories basically independently, and also just resonated with a ton of people. Like this is the one where people were like, "Oh, I'm paying attention now," and I felt bad for people because at the time, if they went back to play 2 and especially 1, they'd be like, "Hey, wait a minute." Like it's a lot different than I would say like if you play like Horizon Zero Dawn and then you play Horizon Forbidden West, you're not like, it's not like, oh my God, these are completely different games. You're kind of like, I would say that sequels nowadays, first of all, they take longer to make, but the leaps aren't as significant as they were back then.
No, I'll make this joke a few times, but like it is a far cry between Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 2.
Yeah.
Like it is actually in Far Cry 2, you have malaria and your guns break and everything is sort of khaki colored. In Far Cry 3, you have Sambuca shots and you can jump out of an airplane whenever you want. And everything is brightly colored like a fun Hawaiian shirt or a soda commercial. Like it's one of those Corona beach ads, except with a grenade launcher. Like I like it because it's really tacky. Like it's aggressively, like I can't tell how much of it is done kind of ironically or tongue in cheek and how much of it is just sort of accidental, but I actually got into Far Cry 3 came out right when I started wearing Hawaiian shirts, and I wore them kind of passive aggressively because it always just struck me as like this sort of, here's this thing that like is supposed to look like, a floral getaway place, but it's sad and it's like some dude's going to wear it to Chili's or whatever. And I was like, I'll wear that sort of ironically. And then Far Cry came along where you play as a dude named Jason Brody, who he's got bro in his last name. The game opens and it's basically doing all this GoPro shit, pounding shots with his friends. And it's all like through GoPro footage, which is a really nice kind of way of integrating that. And then he gets kidnapped by pirates. Right. And then he's just on this island and it's playing like, MIA's Paper Planes. And it's just, there's just mean pirates. You're like, why are the pirates mean? Why are they being, and they're just, it doesn't really go into it too much. They're just bad guys and they kidnap your friends. And you're like, well, there's only one thing to do. And that's murder a whole bunch of animals so that I can upgrade my flamethrower pouch to carry more flamethrower ammunition so I can kill them with fire. And you're like, it's just the level of escalation to go from like, I don't know. There's that expectation that like an M-rated video game is going to it's going to tell like a serious story. And Far Cry 3 is fairly straight-faced the whole time. In spite of this, everything happening in that game being completely fucking wackadoo bananas. Like it's
actually insane what happens in that game. And that's just what's scripted to happen in that game.
And then like the shit that happens.
Yeah, the amount of things, that was one of the first times I remember playing a game where I was like, there are like so many bizarre systems at play here that I am not in control of by any means, but they gave me a bunch of toys to play with, right? Like you have vehicles, you have weapons, you have a knife, you got grenade launchers and stuff like that, but there's animals everywhere. There are Asian black bears, there's tapirs, there's bird of paradise, buffaloes.
You just reading the list of animals in there?
Yeah, bull shark. Just giving people a heads up on how many great animals there are.
It's just like zoo books. It's just if you ever read zoo books, you want to fight those animals, you can do that in Far Cry 3. That's the fucking name of the game. It's just so funny how there's absolute disregard to anything resembling concern for animals at all. I don't think the game ever acknowledges it. And I'm not saying that video games need to be realistic. It's just funny to me that it's like, oh, you would like to be better at the game? Well, better go kill a bunch of endangered species. Yep. Is that a plot point? Nope. Yeah, you're just gonna go kill the endangered animals. And it's like it doesn't exactly glorify it, but it also sure as hell doesn't make it seem bad. You're just like, what are we doing?
Yeah, you kind of have to do it to get better stuff, right? Otherwise, it's hard mode. But yeah, there are missions specifically around hunting in the game. And what I love about this is that like they make you feel less bad about it because at any given moment you could be in a gunfight with somebody and an animal could burst out of the forest and just ruin your day or ruin the other guy's day. And that started one of my favorite things that became a trend in that franchise, which is just the chaos of it. It's that multiplied by the fact that like the fire in these games is so fun and so unpredictable that when you have all these overlapping systems that you don't have full control of, and you have a couple of measures in which you can fight back against it or cause it yourself, it creates this like perfect sandbox. Like my least favorite thing are sandbox games that don't really have a lot of sand, right? It's just like you built an open world, but there isn't much.
Do you mean like
doing it
metaphorical sand or?
Yeah. Not like, there's obviously not a ton of sand.
Because I would say Far Cry 2 has more sand than Far Cry 3, unless you're in the beaches, in which case it's about even.
There's a lot of beaches.
Do you mean like more like Tonka trucks in the sandbox?
I mean
more
like
Hot
stuff,
Wheels,
yeah,
more
stuff
G.I.
to do,
Joes, yeah,
stuff to play with, yeah, all that fun stuff. And so what I really liked about Far Cry 3 when I first saw that game was the box art is a picture of who we now know is Michael Mondo from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, amazing actor who's also the Scorpion, I think.
He was like almost the Scorpion, yeah,
almost in a post-credit stinger in like the first rebooted MCU Spider-Man movie.
I mean, if any character should show up as a stinger, it's the Scorpion. But
yes,
they didn't do anything with him. But so he was the big introduction to that game. Honestly, that it was one of those big sort of overly polished like Ubisoft E3 reveals. That's kind of looks like the gameplay, but it's mostly over polished cinematic. But it opens with Voss, who's this pirate dude who kidnaps you, and he does this whole monologue about like the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, hoping for the same results. Which, if you think about it, is kind of a brilliant sort of assessment of how those games are played, where like there is emergent gameplay, and if you try, you can recreate scenarios to a certain degree, but there is there's not insignificant chance that like a jaguar is going to come in and catch fire and fuck everything up. And then suddenly all these dudes are mad at the jaguar and the jaguar is trying to kill you too. And it's on fire. It's just like one of those, like, you know, you couldn't try that again. That would be insane, but also, you know, maybe lean into the insanity anyway. But it's this wonderful monologue. I didn't know that was Michael Mondo until, you know, I knew him as Voss first. I think a lot of people did.
Right.
Was he in Orphan Black? Did you say? Was he in that? He was in
possibly. Yeah. Like, I mean, it was Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul that put him on the map for me, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean,
he's been popping up and stuff for years.
He's been in a bunch of shit. Yeah. And
I think what was like so cool about Far Cry 3 to me was that I saw the box art and I was like, oh, so I'm the guy sitting on the beach, right? And it's like, no, that's the bad guy. You're the guy who's buried up to his head in sand and he's going to kill you. And you're like, so do I have to, like, do I dig out of the, like, do I have to dig out of the sand and then kill that guy that's sitting right there? And because he's just cross-legged, it seems easy. But also, like, what a fucking threatening box art that is. Like, no, and it tells you everything you need to know about the game. Like,
yeah, every video game for the most part, the box art is like the dude you play as either walking towards the camera or away from it. That's sort of how it goes. Mm-hmm. In the case of Far Cry, it's the bad guy, who's just front and center in this cool ass, like, you know, glamour shot, and then maybe you're sort of in the picture. Maybe it's just sort of implied that things are really fucked up over there.
And he's got two people hanging up behind him, which you're like, by their feet, and you're like, are those my buddies? Is that my friend? Like, what do I do here? But it's this gorgeous, beautiful paradise shot, like superimposed with this, you know, psychotic man, and the protagonist underground with a gun to his head.
The thing I love about Far Cry 3 specifically is that it's a place I would want to be, aside from all the bad things that are happening there. And I think that a lot of games are sort of, you know, if they're like, oh, it's got mature, gritty, messed up subject matter, then everything has to sort of match that. And it's the same thing that I think is, you know, great about like Vice City, for instance. I like that you can have this like, you know, colorful, lush, gorgeous place. It's also kind of a hellhole. And it's like a nice kind of, and, you know, the other Far Cry games after the fact they've gone to different locations. There's definitely an element of sort of virtual tourism, which I do appreciate a whole lot, but it's hard to top that like tropical island vibe for me. I just really enjoy it. Like, it looks like, I don't know, it looks like the calendar that a depressed guy in a Hawaiian shirt would have in his desk cubicle. Like, there's a sort of, you know, element of, you know, the movie Brazil to it, which I dig, even though it's not set anywhere near Brazil. But,
they have a bunch of stuff in that game that is the kind of thing that you would say, like, maybe in your 20s to your friends on vacation. Like, you'd be like, do you want to go parachuting? Do you want to go hang gliding? Do you want to go in a wingsuit? Do you want to go take a jet ski around? Like, the ways you get around these games, like, you go off-roading in, you know, buggies and quad bikes and shit like that. But you can also fly around in aerial vehicles or like fuck around on the sea and stuff and go, you know, shoot sharks in the head. Like, there's all this shit that's like, I would get arrested doing a lot of this stuff, but a lot of this stuff is the kind of thing where, like, I don't know, if like me and a couple of friends were day drinking, we're like, yo, you guys want to go?
No, it's like it's 100% things that you can do on vacation, but like the really, like, it's, you know, really kind of, if there were no rules, if there were no laws in place. No, you mentioned it, the movie The Beach. Came out in 2000, directed by Danny Boyle, based on a novel written by Alex Garland, who's since gone on to become a director, you know, all of his own. He's done Annihilation. He just recently did Civil War. This was loosely based on his own experiences, I believe, backpacking. And the basic hook is actually really similar. It's pretty much beach for beach Far Cry 3, except Far Cry 3 takes the whole video game slider and just pushes it all the way to one side. Right. But the kind of main thing is that these, you know, goofy backpacking tourists wind up discovering like a drug island, and the drug guys are like, get off our drug island, we're mean. And then things get a little bit crazy. The difference is in Far Cry, you know, instead of being like, things are fucked up, we should avoid these guys, they're like, what if we took a flamethrower and then set all their weed on fire? And Skrillex was playing, and it's like a dubstep remix of a reggae song because weed. That happens in Far Cry 3, and and that's one of those things that's scripted, and it's transcended, and the pot smoke starts coming up, and you start seeing, like, you know, trails and shit. You're just getting, like, you know, body echoes, and I'm like, did they really? They just made a mission where you're supposed to go and, like, just fuck up a pot farm, but then you get contact high the whole time. Like, it's just such a stupid, like, again, it's broy. Like, it's a broy-ass game. Also, every time you unlock a new skill, you get a new tribal tattoo, which is just so funny to me. Like, it's so, like, it could not be more, like, puka shell necklace ass Jason Brody bullshit. And I love it.
It's incredible. Yeah. It is such a revolutionary game. I love it so much. And then I was like, all right, I think I understand what this franchise is all about. And then a year later, we get probably the weirdest semi-sequel spinoff of any video game ever. And it's so brilliant. And I love it so much. It's called Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon. And and instead of being like, oh, this is more, you know, of the tropical island stuff you like, it is just this nightmare trapper keeper, total, you know, throwback to 80s action flick send-ups starring fucking Michael Biehn from Terminator. And you're like, what the hell is this? I remember they debuted this and I was like, this is mind-blowing.
So what happened with that game is they announced it on April Fool's. I think maybe there was like a trademark or something that popped up first and people were like, that seems strange. What could that be? And then they put up this like teaser website that had like the Ubisoft logo, but it looked like it was on a VHS, you know, an old VHS movie. And then it had like this vaporwave grid in the background. And there was this like janky ass trailer where it was playing some like Terminator sounding music. And I think the caption just said like, it is the year 2007. It is the future. And this is in like 2013. So that was, we're kind of like, okay. And there's like one brief like frame where there's like almost like the tracking on your VCR is off, where it showed what looked like gameplay, but it looked like Far Cry, but very much not. And everyone's like, the fuck is this? Like an April Fool's joke? Okay, whatever. And then this like other trailer went up, I think on actual April Fool's Day, or like, I forget the timeline for this exactly, but basically this thing seemed like an April Fool's joke. And then it seemed less like an April Fool's joke. And the thing that really cemented that it was not just a joke is the Australian ratings classification board put up a rating for Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon that was like, this is rated R18 for no one under the age of 18. Why? And it's like, oh, it's violent. What else? It has a high impact sex scene. And everyone's like, okay, that's kind of an interesting thing to have in a Far Cry game, I guess. And there's some sexy shit in the main one. So you're like, okay, where could this go? The game comes out. It is a totally standalone thing. Basically, this bizarre ass direct-to-video, paleo-futuristic cyberpunk. Again, like all of the best weird 80s, 90s action movie crap is in. You just have RoboCop's gun the whole time. They don't even like address it. They're just like, yeah, you have it. The sex scene winds up being all the cutscenes are just like the shittiest like 8-bit, Ninja Gaiden intro. And so I think it's just this really, like, it's like if somebody tried to make a sex scene in MS Paint, like so like it got an 18 plus rating for that. Of course, you're also, eviscerating cassowaries and shit. But the whole thing was this wonderful little standalone game that came out and everyone was like, this cannot be for real. And it was real. They announced the fucking thing and it came out 3 weeks later and everyone's like, how the fuck is this real?
It's amazing. Yeah.
And like, we don't get anything else like that. And like, I went to a preview event for it. And I met the creative director, who's Dean Evans, who's just fucking hilarious. He's just like a wonderfully weird, brilliant dude. And we like immediately clicked. And I just remember I did some like, bullshit, like, tell me about the game, Dean. What's going on with that? Are there outposts? And he's like, no, there are not outposts. There's strongholds. Or I think there's like some other word. And it was like, it's the same thing. But he's like, no, we don't have that. It's something way cooler. And then I was like, Are there quests? And he's like, no, there aren't quests. What do you think? This is a game with elves? No, you're a cyber commando. You're on a mission. It's just like,
I think you literally you're like a cyborg with like a glowing red eye, and you have some of the best VO I've ever heard in a video game because it's a classic actor, and it's yes, absolutely an asset flip of a bunch of shit in Far Cry 3, but also like it's just pitch black the whole game, and like it's just oppressively evil, but also fun as hell. And everywhere you go, there's like these horrible laser grids, and the titular blood dragons are like these massive. They're not dinosaurs, but they're about as close as the franchise has ever gotten.
They're like Godzilla like toads, sort of like they're just like
Yes.
fat Godzillas that can breathe like laser blasts at you. Like they're just
And you fight all these like awful soldier guys and blow them up, and you know raid their bases and stuff like that. And it's you know about a third of the length of Far Cry 3, and
not even.
It's
like,
not even
it's
right.
like 3 hours or something. It's like
I think
stupidly
if you-
short, but it's like it's fun. And again, it doesn't overstay its welcome. And presumably, if you played Far Cry 3 at that point, you're like, okay, I get it. I get the loop. And it's like it's a story you can burn through. And I think that the joke would have kind of run itself thin by the end. And maybe it does a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit long in the tooth, but it's also just completely fucking bonkers. Like it totally it just goes. And like Far Cry 3 was already pretty fucking bonkers, but this game just totally throws it out the window. One of my favorite things about it is the entire aesthetic is just so spot on. Like it has such a distinctive style guide. Like it clearly understands the assignment. It understands how things should look. It's spot on. And one of the things that I remember Dean saying was that basically the instructions for the artists was don't make anything that looks like it would cost more than $20 or whatever. Like everything in this game, like all the shit that these cyborgs have on them, it needs to look like it came from the Goodwill. Like it needs to look like thrift store shit, dry brush silver. And it does. And it's like wild to me that they were just like, okay, yeah, you know, if you're going to be making something digitally, it can be anything. It could be really cool. They could hire an art team to make something that looks really, really fucking slick and new and futuristic. But what if it just looked like a piece of shit from a direct-to-video 90s movie?
Right.
And I don't know, that works.
And they nailed it.
Yeah.
And I think it got like a surprise like HD remaster a couple years ago, which was extremely like bare bones by modern standards, obviously. But like it's fully playable on PC and consoles now. So like if you missed it or you need like you're like, hey, I've never played one of these games, although I just listened to these guys talk about them for several minutes. Play it. It holds up. I replayed it just a few years ago, and like I think I 100%ed it and went in and just did all the nonsense, and it's just so smart.
It's
like,
a
it is
blast,
just so clever.
It's good. It's good, smart, stupid. The one thing it's got the perfunctory tutorial shit, and if you've already played 3, you're like, I know how to do all this stuff, and the whole time Michael Bihn's like, why are you fucking telling me how to do these things?
Yes.
And it's like,
Get
you
out
know
of
that
my fucking ears.
Yeah, he's like, what am I like? Why know how to fucking crouch? Why are you telling me how to crouch? And it's just, I love that it's that kind of like, wink and a nod bullshit. But the thing that sucks about Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon is that after that, where do you go? You know, and
right.
They set the bar so fucking high. Like they stuck the landing with those 2 games. One, like Far Cry 3 is sort of top to bottom. Like everything's there. All the shit is there. In Far Cry 4, they added some new stuff. They added co-op. You can play the entire game with a friend. They added flying vehicles. They added helicopters. In Far Cry 3, you basically like you would just teleport into the sky and you would like parachute or like wingsuit down for places. Like that was the solve for that. But in 4,
So for Far Cry 4, what is fascinating about Far Cry 4 is that it came out like, so Far Cry 2 was in 2008, 3 was in 2012, a year later Blood Dragon, and a year after that Far Cry 4. So I think that was part of it, was just sort of like, okay, we got 3 Far Cries in 3 years, which was a normal thing back in the day. You would just get more video games. Video games came out more often.
Well, that
like
was the
sequels.
thing that, people got mad at Ubisoft for that, for cranking out new shit every year. And like, I don't know. I think with Far Cry, they did have an interesting cadence where basically there would be like the big flagship entry with a number on it, and then some weird diversion as like, so they never got quite as weird as Blood Dragon, but they would go into interesting places, I guess.
I was always warmer on Far Cry 4 than you were, but Far Cry 4 basically takes place in kind of like a fictitious Himalayas. It introduces a brand new villain, Pagan Min, who is like, he's played by Troy Baker, and he's this just like psychotic blonde guy who wears like Willy Wonka suits. And when the game first came out, I did this like Photoshop of the cover of the game is like Pagan Min with his hand on somebody's head, and I photoshopped him to look like Willy Wonka, and then photoshopped a bunch of Oompa Loompas in there. I have no idea where that is. It exists somewhere. And I remember like a bunch of people at Ubisoft were like, hey, like off the record, we loved that. And we were all sharing it with each other. But I can't say that publicly, but yeah,
please do not do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Please don't do that. But what was cool about Far Cry 4 is I believe it was one of the first games. I don't know if you could do this in 3, where you could beat the game in like 7 minutes if you did a certain thing. If you did there's a question early on where Pagan Min asks you about Crab Rangoon, and depending on how you answer them, it just like rolls credits, and you're like, all right, that's
basically
hilarious.
if you do the shitty thing, like it just assumes that you're going to try to be a good guy, and I think if you just there's some part where he like wanders off and it assumes that you're going to like use that chance to escape. But if you just stay there or like, and he's like, oh, congratulations, you win, the end. And it's like, it's like,
it's very funny.
That's become a thing they've done. I think all the mainline games since, and it's like a nice little Easter egg, but
yeah, in terms of like comparing the like the systems are a little more intricate. The vehicles are better. There's more guns and there's more interesting animals and stuff like that. But in terms of like the diversity of the locale, it's not as cool as like a tropical island.
So
like
Karat Karat is based on Nepal. I did the Comic-Con panel for this because I was like so fucking nuts about Far Cry at this point, and they did an interesting.
Yeah, I was in the crowd for that.
The crowd. It was, I don't know. It was, I guess there was a turnout there, but the weird thing about that is when they were sort of promoting that game, it feels like they had a different idea of what people liked about Far Cry than what they actually did. But then again, maybe not. So the way they were promoting at Comic-Con was they'd hired like a Vice documentary crew to go to Nepal and like report on it and show like a bunch of like local customs and really give this like, you know, accurate portrayal of like what it's like there and, you know, what Karat is based on. And it was this kind of very dry, like serious travelogue approach to to this game where you can set a bear on fire and like ride an elephant and like, you know, run people over with the elephant and step on cars and they blow up or whatever. And I was like, okay, so it's taking itself too seriously there. And then at PAX that same year to promote it, they had people putting on like polar bear and elephant bear costumes or whatever and doing like wrestling or something. There were those big like jumbo sumo costumes and they were just like, was that for 4 or was that for Primal?
I know. I think that was I want to say that was for 4, and I think that was I mean, you and I have done some very uncomfortable things in our careers in terms of like putting stuff on or getting in, you know, the water with an alligator or whatever. That was like so I got asked to do a video about this. I don't even know where that is, but we put on these animal costumes, which are basically just furry costumes, right? It's just like it was just different animals in the game, and we beat each other up while wearing them, and they just smelled awful in there because I forget when I got there, but like I think it might have been day 2 or 3 of PAX where they're like, "Hey, we reserved you the." So I don't like, again, I have no judgment of what people do in furry costumes. I have some ideas. Some guesses.
It's usually not. It's roughhousing of a different sort, but a little bit at PAX, but not as publicly at PAX, I guess. But yeah.
But I will say that those things in general are probably. I hope that those people maintain those a little bit better than they do at a PAX, where like hundreds of strangers are entering these costumes and then getting physical with each other in like a wrestling ring, right? So yeah, that was gross. That was nasty.
You also, in terms of just like how to promote this game, you could not have like 2 more disparate showings than like, here's some guys talking about a documentary they made in like a war-torn country and then put on animal suits and wrestle. Like it's just completely other ends of the spectrum. And weirdly enough, the game is somehow neither. Like it feels like it became sort of self-aware, after Far Cry 3 and Blood Dragon. It's kind of like, yeah, we've got to be insane. We've got to be like over the top. And so like Pagan Min is like, he's way more kind of like, he's kind of goofy, you know, like he's way more like, I think, charismatic and like a kind of like he's more like a Joker than a full on psychopath. And you know, Voss is gnarly. Like he seems like it's a very earnest performance, and like, you know, Troy Baker's like into it, but it's like Pagan Min is just, you're kind of like, who's this man supposed to be? Like, what's his deal? And he's this like despot, and the whole time the weird thing is he's on like the local, you know, radio. Mm-hmm. So like no matter what you're doing in that game, he's just like issuing these weird like these missives where he's just like,
he's talking to you like the whole time.
Yeah. And he's also like your cousin or something. Like he's your uncle. I forget the deal. Like but it felt like they took certain elements of the game and took it way more seriously. And then others, they were like, it's crazy and kooky. And this is Far Cry 4 is where they basically took the entire sort of drug tourist element of 3, and there's these like these two like dumbass like snowboarders or something who are just like, they just give you like different mushrooms and you take like different drug trips and it becomes like, whoa, isn't it? Like it felt very, like dorm room postery in a weird way.
100%. I have no, if you're doing it within recreational reasons and you're not hurting anybody or whatever, I don't really care about whatever people do with their drugs, right? Have fun. Good luck or whatever. But the shit in these games that just became a series staple, I will call it out. It is insufferably annoying. And there are these things where every single game they have some sort of narrative excuse to be like, whoa, this is crazy. And you're just like stumbling around. Everything is foggy. And I get it. Like the developers are kind of like, we want to have fun. We want to do something silly. We want to have a little side quest here where there's like a giant tiger in Shangri-La or whatever. But like they're so tedious.
Well, it's always the part where it like slows to a crawl, where like this is a game where you can, you can zip around on a wingsuit. You've got a private helicopter. You've got like a pet elephant or whatever. And then it's like, okay, but this part is scripted and you're going to be tripping balls and there's going to be bad guys. When you shoot them, they turn into purple smoke. And also you don't have any of your guns because it's like, it's a dream or whatever. And you're like, it's just, it just starts becoming, I don't know. I feel like weirdly enough, Far Cry started having an identity at this point, and like 3 almost felt like it felt like, I don't know, somebody made a movie using this shit, using these systems.
Yeah.
Like it has a sort of distinctive feel to it. And then Blood Dragon definitely felt like that. It felt like somebody found shit in a dumpster and they were like, let's make something different. Let's make something even stupider. And then 4 feels like, okay, we have like a clear idea of what this franchise is, which is, again, that's kind of a drag because the name Far Cry suggests that it is something drastically different. It suggests that it's, and again, it's sort of a perfect formula. Like it's a really, really fun way of making an open world game to the point that it's been kind of beaten to death, to the point they have to like really, really overreach to think of ways to shake things up. And I think people still buy them, people still play them, but there's like a certain level of like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm in for, which is sort of the opposite of what you want from a game that's about going to some place you've never been and experiencing shit you've never experienced before.
I get that. I totally get that. I think all those things aside, I like Far Cry 4 because there's a lot of really silly verticality in that game.
Oh, the helicopter's fun as fuck.
So the thing is about the vehicles in Far Cry 4 is that they're shitty in a fun way, in a very silly, funny way. And when they go too high, the helicopter starts whistling and it makes this like DuckTales ass Launchpad McQuack noise. But like getting up in the helicopter and just like firing grenades down on a road full of, bad guys, you'll just see like a convoy or whatever come down the street and you just start firing at them and they start getting mad at you and firing at you. And then a bird flies in your helicopter. Your vehicle's got like tape on it and shit like that. The
Far Cry 4
sucks.
is like a little bit broken in that I think that if you like pre-ordered the game, you would just get a one-handed grenade launcher pistol day one, and you get a helicopter pretty early. And so you're just flying around and you're like, in Far Cry 3, you're like, I got to sneak up through the bushes and I got to, kill a bunch of pumas to get like enough arrows that I can take out the alarms and snipe these dudes. And I'm going to be stealthy and really careful. And then in like 4, you're like, I'm going to fly overhead and I'm just going to lob one grenade into this compound. It's going to blow up a bunch of oil drums and free a tiger. And the tiger is going to eat a bunch of dudes and the alarm is going to go off, but it doesn't matter because the tiger ate everybody and I liberated the outpost.
Fire's going to keep going the whole time. Like, yeah. I mean, that's what was always fun about these games is that you can go in stealthy and quiet and you can stab people, very Assassin's Creed. You can hit people with arrows from a distance and stuff like that and poison darts. And you can send in, an animal that you've tamed or whatever. And then things go south and then you go guns out. And that's like, some of my favorite kind of games are the ones where you're like, you have a good plan, you go in, you're taking guys out one by one by one, and all of a sudden, whoops, banana peel, some guy saw me, something opened up, something happened I wasn't expecting. Like you'll be in the middle of like doing a stealth run through a camp and you can get you get rewards for doing this shit, right? But then all of a sudden, like a bear runs in from out of nowhere and his back's on fire and no one knows why. And he sees you and you're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. And then, all the flags go up, all the alarms go off, and things go crazy. So that's what, like, I think that Far Cry 4 exemplified that level of systems really well in ways that 3 started and I think 4 kept going with. And then 2 years later, by this time in the timeline, or what maybe it was, it was 2 years later. This is when people now suddenly were not forgiving of asset flips. and they wanted every single thing to be original and take forever. And that's why we haven't had a new Far Cry game in over 5 years. 2 years later, we got Far Cry Primal, which was fucking insane if you think about it. Like, they were like,
insane.
Yeah, we're going to take the map from Far Cry 4. Hope no one notices. I didn't care. I still don't care. But architecturally, it's the same map, right? But instead of it taking place in like modern day Himalayas, it takes place fucking 10,000 BC,
10,000 years earlier. So
it's in the upper Paleolithic, beginning of the Mesolithic period in Europe.
So you do not have a helicopter in that one.
You don't have a bra. Like there's no like there's just like, you know, old body parts are out the whole game. Half the people are naked or got their titties and dicks and stuff like that. And then there's no dinosaurs because they're dead already. They're gone. But you do get some weird big stupid 10,000 BC ass animals, right? Like you get some Ice Age shit.
Yeah, you become like the Beastmaster.
Mm-hmm.
I think I played Primal too close to 4, and it was that thing where I'm like, I've done enough of this shit before that this feels a little samey. I should go back and play it some more because it's such a novel idea where it's like, all right, here's your like flagship AAA, you know, first person shooter. What could you do to really completely fuck that up? Well, how about make it so no one has guns? Everyone's throwing rocks and shit at each other. You only have like little like slingshots and like maybe like a stick you can throw, and it's just. I mean, people always joke, like, what if they did a Call of Duty where it's the Civil War and you have to, like, load your musket? It's like, what if your gun was a rock? You know, like, what if you really just went completely overboard? And they did that. And it's kind of wild. And even wilder is that it's got, like, a totally serious story.
Yeah.
Like, they play it straight. I mean, yeah, there's that.
Mostly. There's one character in the game that teaches you skills. And they're based on inventions, and he's sort of like a primitive Leonardo da Vinci mixed with Wile E. Coyote, where he's just like, hey, so I made this wingsuit, check it out, and he just like dive bombs off a cliff and it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, they put a lot of weird slapstick humor in this game, but also like it's pretty. The story itself is actually pretty sad.
Isn't
like
the entire thing is also like subtitled? I don't even know what language it's in.
Yes,
like it's in like Neolithic something. It might be some indigenous language. I don't know what the fuck they're speaking. It's entirely subtitled, which is again pretty big swing to be like, all right, here's this thing. You know, the rest of the games are like, it's a cool Hollywood action movie. You have machine guns and jet skis. All right, what if no one spoke English and also you don't have guns or jet skis? You have a rock. That's the game.
You can ride what is it, saber-toothed tigers in this game? Like I remember there was some
Sammy Woliths, you know,
just you get a bunch of like clubs and stuff. You just beat shit to death in the head. Yeah. Like it's
I appreciate the ambition. And then from there they did. I think there was the Far Cry 4 had DLC that wasn't standalone, and it was everyone's like, all right, well, how are they going to top Blood Dragon? And they were like, we're adding Yetis, and everyone's like, that's it. And they're like, yeah, there's going to be Yetis. You can go find the Yetis, and you're like, all right, man, that's fine. I guess
not as cool.
Yeah, whatever.
Definitely not as cool.
They tried, I guess. Not a blood Yeti, not a piss Yeti, just a regular Yeti. You got blood dragons. You got to have something. You got to have like a cum Yeti or something. You got to have some kind of bodily fluid animal.
We're gonna roll right past that. I'm gonna say that this is also when I will not acknowledge the cum Yeti. I will also say that this is when Far Cry started a stir fry. Star Fox. You broke me. You said come Yeti and like everything fell off the rails. This is when they started making DLC that was such a massive departure, or Far Cry, from the base game that you were kind of like, what the fuck is wrong? Like, what is this? Why? Like, you would buy the season pass to these games, so you would get a bunch of shit up front, and then like months later they'd be like, "Hey guys, we're going to Vietnam to fight zombies."
So that was 5, and 5 is just like all over the place. And the thing I have to remind myself about 5 is that most people don't live in America.
Yeah,
the majority of the Earth does not live in America, so there's definitely a market for people who would like to play a video game that's set in like backwoods America. Mm-hmm. That's not about like weird American, you know, preppers or truthers or whatever. Like it's not, and there's no weird like, you know, Christian conservative, like, you know, gun waving. There's none of that none of that shit. That maybe that shit is all exotic to them. You know, like for all I know that there's somebody who lives in like the South Pacific who like Far Cry 3 came along and they were like, I don't want to fucking play this game. This looks gross and, you know, in poor taste. And also I live here. I could go jet skiing anytime I want. And then Far Cry 5 came out and I was like, seems awfully close to home. And I can go hiking in trees that look like that whenever I feel like it. And it's just, yeah, 5 is...
Well, it's also, it's like it takes place in fictitious Montana and it came out, well, first of all, like Montana's mostly flat, right? Like there's some mountain ranges around it. So canonically they have a reason to keep you trapped inside this like valley, right? But it's different than, you know, going to like an island or going to the Himalayas or something like that, where you're like, wow, what a crazy new place. Cause also I was kind of like, well, so what are the animals here? It's like, oh, we got bulls, bears, there's dogs that don't like you. You're like, fucking dogs? Like I could get bit by a dog outside.
That's what I'm saying though. But if you live in the fucking jungle, you know, or like the actual, or, you know, the Himalayas or like the Alps, I don't know, if you live in like, I don't know, if you live in fucking Amsterdam, Far Cry 5 probably seems pretty exotic. It's probably just as exotic as 3 and 4. And, you know,
keep in mind, for context, for those listening at home, Far Cry 5 takes place entirely in America, around a religious cult. The box art, the key art, is basically imitating the Last Supper. And this came out in 2018, which globally was 2 years into the first Trump administration, where all of a sudden this like American flag, MAGA, patriotism stuff was everywhere. And we were like, oh man, they're going to lampoon that. Right? They're going to do a whole send up of that. They're going to skewer conservative, religious, and like Far Cry 5 is one of the most pro-gun, anti-animal. Like they nudge you repeatedly to buy like assault rifles with American flags on them. So I think like it's. And this is not me being like, I'm disappointed, because it's like, I think that like a Far Cry game that is just like, hey guys, put the guns down, don't hurt the animals, you know, let's come together.
That was kind of what Primal was. They were like, just befriend the animals, make love to them.
Guns down. we didn't even invent the guns yet.
We don't know what Far Cry 5 is.
Yeah, it doesn't really take a political stance either way, which is fine.
Well,
like,
5 was,
ultimately.
I feel like was the peak of like, we don't make political statements, and it's like, yeah, but okay, how do you explain like it's like Tom Clancy makes like political thrillers.
Yeah.
Like it's in the name, it's of the genre, like political. Like
Ubisoft during this era could have made like a January 6th game, and they would have been like, it's a multiplayer open world.
My guy, have you seen the fucking key art for the Division 2? It is that.
Exactly. It's just that. It's literally just that. Like, and they're like, well, we don't really do politics stuff over here. And you're like, but look at your own box art, guys. Yeah. So anyway, this is I believe was the best selling Far Cry game for a while. I'm not sure if 6 has topped it, but this was a massive hit. This was a game that was like, we were, you know, very deep into the PS4, Xbox 360 generation, or Xbox One, or Xbox One X, all that. You remember all that. And on PC, right? Like there was just millions of people playing this game, and
it's good.
It's really good. Like, it's considering it's not like the sort of like escapism that I look for when I come to these games. I think you nailed it in terms of like, hey, it's not, you know, maybe for somebody else this is that. I still 100% of this game. Like, I still played everything in this game. I did everything there was to do. There's a bunch of goofy nonsense in this game.
You have to collect bull testicles with like a
Yep.
weird tractor that's got like a chainsaw on it or something.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But it's also like you take down this family of these people. It's the Seed family, and each one of them is like a major cult member, and they all have like a different theme to them. And yes, one of them is again drug themed, and you have to go through his poppy fields and, you know, do all that fun shit. But it's really interesting in that I remember I did an interview with the creative director Dan Hay, who is one of the most like kind of stoic, intimidating people I've ever met. And I was like, so tell me about Far Cry 5. And he did the opposite of what you heard when you did the interview for Blood Dragon, where he was like, imagine you're standing on the precipice of the end of your time, the beginning of a new day. Are you going to leap? Are you going to drive off? And I was like, where is this fucking going? This is insane. I'm like, do I still have to kill a bear and then steal his fur and make like running shoes or whatever? And he's like, yeah, you get to do a lot of that.
There's that,
all
but
the stuff that you love will be there.
I love that the whole like messaging around that was, and again, it was just like at a time when it was like, it's just like a weird, I don't know, if you're not going to say anything political, then fucking don't, make a tropical getaway that's got pipe bombs or whatever. Like fucking just make it neither here nor there. But, all of that messaging, all that bullshit. And then you play the game and it's like, if you go and liberate the bear Cheeseburger will be your friend. He's a bear in a hat and he'll go kill people for you. And it's like, that was the big thing that game added. It was like, they added planes, which was like, I forgot you didn't have planes, whatever. And then also you could get sidekicks or whatever. Yep. And some of them were animals. So it was like, you'd have a dog. You're like, all right, that's believable. And then there's just this fucking bear in a hat named Cheeseburger. And you're like, yeah, go kill all those people, Cheeseburger. And the bear's like, he was
like theoretically liberated from a circus or something like that. It doesn't matter. They
sort of try to tie it in, whatever. And then Far Cry 6, man, I actually really like, I think 6 is maybe my third favorite.
I love 6.
But
I love
6 is so fucking all over the place. It's like a little bit of everything at once to the point where I'm like, you don't have any idea what's going on over there. Side note, the DLC for 5 is like it was Martians, zombies, and then like Vietnam. And I was just like, what are we doing over here? And then the last piece of DLC was just Blood Dragon. That's when they put out the HD remake. They just redid Blood Dragon in the Far Cry 5 updated engine.
Oh, right. That's what that was. Okay,
and then people were like, I don't want to buy the whole season pass. Just give me fucking Blood Dragon. They're like, fine, just buy it by itself. And you're like, I love that it was just like, they're still chasing that ghost. They're like, what about Martians? And people are like, give us the fucking Blood Dragon. Release the Blood Dragon. But no, 6, all the marketing for that, they were like, we hired the guys who did they did the cinematic intro for HBO's True Detective. And we've hired, oh my God, what's his name? Gus Fring.
Giancarlo
Esposito.
Yeah. Which again, like another great villain in that game.
Yeah, right? And he plays Anton Castillo, and he's this like, sort of Castro adjacent warlord of these like, this Caribbean island nation, and he's just ruthless, and he's a real motherfucker. And then in the game, you get a little dog that's in a wheelchair, and the dog will plant mines for you, and it has a tool belt, and also you can get an alligator wearing a jacket. And a rooster who will fight people for, and it's just like,
is the alligator named Guapo?
He sure is.
Chorizo is the dog, right? And he's missing his back leg, because I remember when the game came out, Ubisoft sent a bunch of like plushies of the dog to the office, and it's just like a little what kind of dog is that?
I think he's a min pin or something. He's like a wiener. Like a wiener pincher.
Yeah, wiener pincher. Second worst thing he said tonight. Wiener pincher. Yeah,
Far Cry wiener pincher.
But they got they hired some company to put wheels on his back legs, which is just it's very funny. But yeah, you and I did the preview event for this game, or we did some video for it before it came out, and we played co-op together. And I just remember having so much fun, because I was like, this is back to like the sort of tropical locale of 3, but also has all the kind of crazy bombast of the previous ones with like weapons and, tanks and all this other shit. And you're basically, you're taking down this like, oppressive regime that like keeps encroaching on all the territories and stuff like that. And it's just really fun. There's just like, again, really good verticality, really great ways to get around the island.
You know what I like about it?
Weapons, snipers.
I think Far Cry, honestly, open world games, I think the secret is that they're at their best when they're on an island.
Yep.
Like, I think it's just, there's something about that where your brain you don't second guess. They're like, oh, what do you mean I can't go over here? Like fucking Skyrim, you go all the way to the top. They're like, you can't go there. It's in a different game. And you're like, fuck you. I hate dragons, you piece of shit.
I hate when you're playing in one of the modern Assassin's Creed games, and like there hasn't been a cutscene in like 25 hours where you remember that you're in the fucking Animus, and then all of a sudden you walk too far and like this hologram shit pops up, and it's like, oh, you're gonna break the sequence.
Your ancestors never went over there.
They don't remember that river.
Yeah,
Christopher, come back! No, don't go in the river.
I don't know. I like the just the island structure is just fun for me. There's something like really fun about that. So I don't know. But yeah, six feels like sort of they kind of revisited what made 3 so much fun, but it's with all of the modern sensibilities, and they added like a bunch of shit in there that really like, and you know, there's other systems that we didn't even touch on where it's like you get like an army or whatever. You end up like getting a resistance that works with you, and so like random dudes will just show up. Like you'll have like a bunch of dudes in like blue shirts who show up and they start fighting these guys in red shirts, and you'll just be like driving by like on your way to go kill kangaroos or whatever, and you're just like, what are you, all right, you guys are having a firefight, have fun over there.
There was like an afternoon where I was on a huge cruise ship in that game, or was like a battleship basically, and I killed everybody. And then they called in, it got like the, GTA 5-star thing or whatever. They called in like these like fighter jets or like there were like helicopters or something, and they just had missiles on them. And I was just like in this little like part of the cruise ship that just had those funny little, porthole windows or whatever. And I just kept waiting for them to come by, and I was sticking my little grenade launcher through it, and I was firing through, and I was fucking these guys up. And it was like 45 minutes, and I was laughing my ass off maniacally and just having the best time. And I was like, this game fucking rules. Like, this is so good. This is exactly what I want. This is probably not what I'm supposed to be doing right now in my life, in this game at all. But like, it was just 45 minutes. And when I took them down and they're like, you win your base, and they give you that cutscene where it pans out, and then like you took over the base, and like people are just like, oh, we can plant herbs now. Or like, now I can.
A bunch of dudes come in, they start like putting up like posters and stuff. They're like,
your buddies come in and they're just like, hey, good job.
Guy walks in with a box of snacks. They're like, hey, cool. My favorite thing that happens in those games is if you're like sneaking around and you like, take out the alarms and you like headshot a few guys, and you're still like, hanging out being stealthy, and then you like free some kind of animal, you like blow the lock off a jaguar cage or whatever, and you're like figuring out your next move, and then all of a sudden the flag just goes up because some jaguar killed the last 3 dudes without you realizing it. And you're just like, all right, what am I gonna do next? And it goes wah, 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 and you're just like, all right, cool, thanks, dog or cat.
It's so good. It's so good.
But better yet though is you liberate the outpost, and the animal is still running around. And so you're like all these dudes show up, and you're like, oh cool, you guys moved in really quick, and then this fucking cougar jumps out of nowhere and starts like eating one of them, and you're like, I gotta go, see you later.
I didn't realize there were like, there's like 100 cars in this game. It's insane. But yeah, there's just so many fun weapons, and it like, they give you that thing again where you're like, I can go in stealthy, or I can start throwing Molotovs at people. It's just a really good time. And one of my favorite things about this game is when you beat the game, they go, good job, here's the cutscene, you beat the game, and then it rolls the credits and it starts back up, and they're like, you unlocked, all this bullshit. And then they say like, oh no, like the bad guys canonically have a reason to keep coming back every week in real time, and so do you. Because the Far Cry Island will never truly be liberated from these fuckers. And like, they just go like, so once a week, at least, I don't know if they're still doing it. It's automated. But
so it's like Animal Crossing with fascism instead of weeds.
Yeah, where like the fascists kept coming back, and they'd be like, oh, they're in this part now, they took it over again. And you're like, that would happen in real life, right? Like if you don't, like if you won against, if there was like these 2 rival, factions, and one of them was trying to take land from the other, maybe you'd take them down for a while, but then also they'd be like, it's been a month, let's get these fuckers over there in the northern corner of fake Florida, And so I love that about that. And then again, they did a bunch of nonsense bullshit. We should point out that Far Cry 5 and 6 did a very weird thing where they allowed players to basically create their own maps, and completely insane things have happened through that. Like, that people have made these like almost Minecraft-esque automated machines, but with just explosives and bears, where they're just daisy chaining.
Somebody made the house from Home Alone in Far Cry 5.
Somebody made that that sad European Wonka experience. Like,
God.
There's people have just made
I forgot
stuff.
about that. Like 3 actually, 3 had like a co-op campaign, and it had like a map editor or whatever, and then like 5 had that too, and then we also completely skipped over New Dawn, which I don't really like very much.
Oh yeah, New Dawn is a repaint of 5. What's interesting about it is that it canonically takes place after the events of 5, which I won't spoil in case you haven't played it, but like something happens in that game that's so silly that you're like, how do you come back from this?
The trailer spoils it, but yeah,
that's true.
If you get the bad ending in 5, then fast forward 50 years or whatever, and suddenly it's this like neon colored like Mad Max situation.
Yeah.
The weird thing about that game though is that there's like way more of an emphasis on crafting, and I think like they have a bunch of like vaguely RPG elements where like suddenly you're shooting dudes in the head, but they have life bars.
Yes, there's a bunch of that like number shit flying out, like very Borderlands.
I love that. That's what I couldn't stomach about that game. You know?
For me, it was that they added a double jump to that game, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I love how stupid we are.
You're like you ride a saber-toothed tiger.
To take themselves seriously. Anyway, come here, Cheeseburger, my bear, and my neon machine gun. We've got to get in my little helicopter and go free more bears to kill more dudes with fire. Like, what? Just
I killed 50 alligators. Time to build a car.
But there's numbers flying off of that man. That's not realistic one bit. No, thank you.
What do you
don't
mean
like it.
a double jump? Yeah, I played the hell out of that game too, and like I don't think it was anywhere near my favorite.
Yeah, I don't know. Like they're fucking awesome. I love these games. They're so much fun. Even when I have like my nitpicks about them, it's because I'm just still chasing that high from Far Cry 3. Like but they're fun. Those outposts, man, they're just a good time. It's a good.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, Far Cry games
they really
rule.
are.
I mean, I think
I'm always chasing that high.
They really just tap into the human urge to go in the woods and burn shit.
Yes,
it's really all it is. It's just,
and you know what? Like Far Cry 6, that is half a decade old now, and like I don't know, by Far Cry standards, by video game standards, I want more Far Cry. I don't know where you go next. There's been rumors about like some multiplayer adjacent thing, like just recently about one of those getting rebooted, about like the sort of the franchise getting forked in two directions, and one of them being like this extraction shooter, and then one of them being like a single player co-op style thing. Just whatever. Give me something.
My favorite thing is people who try to figure out the timeline. Like they're like figuring out the real. It's like the same people who try to figure out like the Zelda timeline, and it's like, my guys, I don't think you understand the point is to play the games and have a good time. They're incredibly disparate, different works that are mostly meant to just be enjoyed on your own terms. But whatever. What actor from Breaking Bad do you want to be the bad guy in Far Cry 7? We got Michael Mondo and we got
Bob Odenkirk.
God, he would be so good.
Wouldn't he be great?
He'd be fucking great.
I don't know where I want it to take place, though. I mean, I still want Dinosaur Far Cry. I guess I also want Bob Odenkirk in it.
I think Bob Odenkirk, Dinosaur Island would be the best.
It doesn't make any sense, but so what? It doesn't need to.
He'd be great.
Like,
He'd be so
just
good.
make something that's fun as hell. Give me a bunch of weapons. Give me all the shit from Terminator, all the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, and half the cast of Better Call Saul. And call it a game. Call it Far Cry 7, really. You don't even have to call it a game. Just call it that. You already have the title.
I love it. Well, what's your one you recommend people check out? Like, what's your...
I mean, I start with 6 just because it's recent, and like by modern video game standards, it's pretty easy to get into. I think from there you could probably go right to 3. I enjoy 4. I have a ranked list, but I will say play 6, play 3. Play Blood Dragon. Those are probably the top 3 I would say that you have to play. And if you love them and you want more, then like the other ones are samey but different enough that like you'll get more of that taste you want, but in various weird.
But it's
flavors.
also like treat it like a trip. Look at the box. Be like, does this look like a place you want to go? Do you want to go to Montana? Do you want to go to Nepal? Like, you can fucking do that. Do
you want to go to 10,000 BC?
Yeah, you want to go to the Flintstones times? You can do that.
Yep.
Yeah, Far Cry rules. Hope they keep making them. That would be nice. And before we go, just a quick shout out to our Patreon producers, Ben Burkhalter, Paul Atienza, Kevin Lemasurier, Steve Cam, Donald Cole, Caleb Hilliard, and Billy McKendry. Thank you all so much.
What's with the needle, Doc?
Listen, this will make you more like Sloane. Powerful, but without the side effects.
No, Doc. No way. I swore an oath to a special lady.
Your wife?
No. Lady Liberty. She taught me that winners don't use drugs.